Hello and welcome. I'm the Reverend William Levwood, the minister here at Accotink Unitarian Universalist Church. My pronouns are he and him. As we begin our service, I invite you to silence your phone if you're here in person, or if you're at home, to close your other windows on your computer, and then to take a deep breath all together as we center ourselves for worship. We open in welcome to the ancestral people of this land, acknowledging that our church, like all of Burke, rests on the unceded territory of the Manahoac tribe of the Great Sioux Nation. We seek healing and the realization of justice with the people of this land who live on in their descendants, the present-day members of the Monacan Indian Nation, the Patawomeck Indian Tribe of Virginia, and the Piscataway Indian Nation. We honor the ancestors as we move toward healing so that all together shall one day know full justice. Please join me. This is the Church of the Open Mind. This is the Church of the Loving Heart. This is the Church of the Helping Hands.
Welcome to Accotink Unitarian Universalist Church. Good morning, Accotinkers. I am Nancy Melito. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm happy to be your worship associate today. This congregation is a welcoming and inclusive community that seeks to create a more just and compassionate world. I hope you got a name tag or have put your name on your Zoom name tag. If you need help with that, let us know in the chat. If you are new to Accotink and would like to talk more about this church, please be sure to reach out to me, our minister, Reverend William Levwood, or one of today's greeters. Whether you're a longtime member or a newcomer or something in between, we encourage you to stay for a social hour, online and in person, immediately after this service. We're so delighted that you decided to join us today. Welcome.
So this is the auction sermon, where congregants bid to earn the opportunity to give the minister a sermon topic. And so I want to share that Anamaria and John Long gave me this topic, and it's kind of a difficult topic. They made me sweat a little bit. So I'm grateful for that, actually, and I hope that I do it justice. So their question is about how welcoming Unitarian Universalism truly is to diverse viewpoints, diverse religious viewpoints, political viewpoints, and just different ways of being in the world. And there's another part that I'm going to address this morning that I'm not sure if it was a part of their topic or just my response, which is how welcoming should we be? Or in other words, are there viewpoints that we as Unitarian Universalists shouldn't welcome in our congregational life? So I want to give a little historical background. As Unitarian Universalists, we pride ourselves on being open-minded and inclusive. Historically, the first Unitarians were persecuted for having heretical views, for finding in the Bible no evidence for a Trinitarian God. And having been persecuted for this belief, our spiritual ancestors became and have continued through the generations to be champions for tolerance and pluralism, defending not only our own right, but the rights of others to have dissenting views. Now, I'm confident that many of you are familiar with our welcome words. In fact, I'm sure many of you have heard those words so many times that at this point, you might tune out during that part of the service, which is why we've been experimenting with shortening the welcome and leaving out some of the words, because it's a little bit long, because it's the same every week, and for one other reason that I'm going to talk about now. So that welcome list that we didn't include in those words this Sunday or last Sunday say this: you are welcome no matter whom you love, no matter your identity or heritage, no matter your beliefs or background, no matter your means or abilities, you are welcome here in this religious community. That's an important statement, and also I think it's a little bit problematic, and I'm going to talk about that. So first of all, there's two, to my mind, very different kinds of things included in that list. The list includes things that some institutions actively exclude from their communities, and the list includes some things that very few groups in this day and age would explicitly exclude. So let's start with the first category. In this category, we have the statements, you are welcome no matter who you love, no matter your identity, no matter your beliefs. So some groups, some religious groups in particular, actively exclude people who aren't straight, cisgender, and who don't describe to particular beliefs like a belief in God. It's important to who we are as Unitarian Universalists that we actively welcome all of these identities who are so often excluded, especially from religious community. Now, in the other category, I would say that there are very few groups in this day and age, religious or otherwise, who would say that they exclude people because of their heritage, their background, their means, or their abilities. So it seems it's perhaps a bit superfluous to state that we are inclusive of those things that most people are inclusive of. But what I think is more important is that it's actually quite difficult to be fully inclusive of people of different heritages, backgrounds, socioeconomic means, and physical and mental abilities. To say that we welcome you in these ways, if we're not willing or able to fully do it, is somewhat disingenuous. And to say it a little stronger, when I say disingenuous, what I mean is that we're lying. Now, to be fair, what we're stating is an aspiration. We want to be fully welcoming of diverse economic levels, educational levels, people with diverse backgrounds and heritage, people of diverse abilities. We say you're welcome here because we want to welcome you. We really do. But if we're honest, we're not fully succeeding at that yet. Which is why, for the most part, you use in general, and here at Accotink, Accotinkers are a relatively homogeneous group in terms of socioeconomic level, education level, one of the highest income and highest educated religious groups in America. In terms of background and heritage and abilities, we're homogeneous. This gathering is designed to serve the needs of a particular person, a person who is middle class, highly educated, of a European American background, and able-bodied. Now, I'm not saying we don't do anything to welcome people outside of that description, or that there aren't people here this morning who earn a relatively low income, who haven't received a college degree, who are people of color, who are not able-bodied. I know you're here with us this morning. But I also know that while this gathering may be meeting some of your needs, perhaps because you're gay or lesbian or transgender, perhaps because you don't believe in God or a particular conception of God, or you're multi-religious, I know that there are other ways that we're still not meeting your needs. And that's just using that welcome list as an example. There may be other ways that we aren't actually welcoming of diverse ways of being, even though we mean to be. I want to share one more example that a colleague who I shared these words with lifted up for me. And I'm talking about those people, those Unitarian Universalists who do believe in God, who perhaps consider themselves both Unitarian Universalist and Christian even. Now, I want to name that many Unitarian Universalists who still consider them Christian themselves Christian are in the closet in many of our congregations. And I know that many of you who were raised Christian have had bad experiences. Some of you had good experiences. Maybe it was a conservative version of Christianity that told you that a loving God was sending some people to hell, especially gay and transgender people, but maybe also women who've had abortions, maybe even people who've been divorced, or people who just don't subscribe to Christianity as a faith tradition. Or it may be that you were raised in a mainline or even liberal Christian tradition, and some of the doctrines just didn't make sense to you. Either way, I think that we often stereotype or fall into stereotyping all Christians as being like the ones who've hurt us in the past. And in doing so, we create an unwelcoming, sometimes even a hostile environment for you Christians in our congregations. And when we do that, we're not living out our values, and we're also missing out on all that you Christians have to offer our community. So one problem with our welcoming in diversity in our midst, which is so central to who we are as Unitarian Universalists, is that in some ways we aren't as welcoming as we say we are, or as we genuinely want to be. So now I'm going to make a quick aside. So bear with me, stay with me. This isn't going to seem like it's related at all at first. So in his commencement speech at Kenyon College, novelist David Foster Wallace said, "There is no such thing as not worshiping. Everybody worships. The only choice we get is what to worship." Now, I don't know if he knew he was paraphrasing Transcendentalist Unitarian Ralph Waldo Emerson or not. Maybe he independently came up with that idea all on his own. But here's what Emerson said more than a century earlier. "A person will worship something. Have no doubt about that. We may think our tribute is paid in secret in the dark recesses of our hearts, but it will out. That which determines our imaginations and our thoughts will determine our lives, our character. Therefore, it behooves us to be careful what we worship, for what we are worshiping, we are becoming." David Foster Wallace goes on to list the things we might worship. He says, "Worship money, and then you will feel that you never have enough. Worship your body and physical beauty, and you will always feel ugly. Worship power, and you'll end up feeling weak and afraid. Worship your intellect, and you'll end up feeling stupid." And like Emerson, David Foster Wallace acknowledges that we may not even be aware of what we're worshiping. He says, "The insidious thing about these forms of worship is not that they're evil or sinful, it's that they're unconscious. They're the kind of worship that you just gradually slip into without ever being fully aware that's what you're doing." Now, when I first became your minister, I learned that the Worship Associates Committee was considering studying the book, The Art of Gathering Together. And that actually hasn't happened yet. But when I heard about it, I immediately went out and read the book. The author of the book, Priya Parker, is a facilitator of gatherings of all kinds. And over the years, she's learned some things about what makes a gathering rich and meaningful and vibrant. And she starts off the book by talking about how important it is to have a clear purpose for a gathering, whether that gathering is a wedding, a baby shower, a workshop, a dinner party, a church service. Now, I want to connect this to Emerson and Wallace, because Parker is talking about the deeper purpose of a particular wedding or baby shower or church service. And she clarifies that a category is not a purpose. So a wedding in and of itself is not the purpose for a wedding. But often we confuse the category for the purpose, and then we abdicate our decision-making to the established form, which may or may not have anything to do with the purpose of our gathering. So she gives the example, we're going to use the example of weddings, that the purpose could be many things. The wedding could be the married couple's way of ceremonially thanking their parents for all they've done for the couple as they set off to build a family of their own. Or the deeper purpose of the wedding might be to weave the couple more deeply into community with their chosen family of close friends. Those are two very different purposes, and if you pay attention to it, you'll design the wedding in very different ways. And I think it's not that different than knowing that we're going to worship something, and that if we don't define what that thing is, if we don't define what we're choosing to give our attention to, we're likely to take on the forms that are already around us. Forms that are focused on money, or physical beauty, or gaining power and possessions, or having a keen intellect. So Parker suggests that there are some questions we can ask to determine what the true purpose of a gathering is. And I want to recognize that I'm expanding her definition of gathering a bit, to extend beyond a single moment of gathering to a community of gatherers, to a congregation like this one, or even to a faith tradition like Unitarian Universalism. And I'm doing that because I think we as Unitarian Universalists do have a purpose. It's real, it's important, it's often life-saving. So I believe that our purpose as Unitarian Universalists is inclusive, but it's also boundaried. That fairly often you use, especially if we just discovered Unitarian Universalism, but often for many years, can be heard raving about the fact that UUs can believe anything. And while we do embrace a wide tent, particularly with theological perspectives, it isn't true that you can believe anything. Worshipping money and the acquisition of things, is that really what we're about? No, I would proffer that that's counter to our principles. And the same is true of worshiping physical beauty or power or intellect, which is not to say that these are bad things. It's okay, it's even wise to give some value to money and beauty and power and intellect, as long as we're aware, as long as it isn't just our default setting, as long as we're giving our deepest allegiance to something more meaningful and life-giving than just a sole focus on any of these goals. As Unitarian Universalists, one of our principles is that we engage in the free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We are more than just open to diverse viewpoints. We believe that by sharing different viewpoints with others, our community is made richer and more resilient. And yet there are boundaries, and those boundaries are important. And those boundaries are defined by our purpose. So one of the questions Parker suggests we ask to discern what our purpose is what problem does our gathering solve? So I asked myself this question about Unitarian Universalism. What problem does Unitarian Universalism solve? And I came up with two answers, or perhaps it's one answer with two parts. The single answer would be that Unitarian Universalism is a haven. The two answers are that it's a haven for two distinct but sometimes overlapping groups. One is that Unitarian Universalism is a haven for seekers. We might say for spiritual seekers, though I know that many UUs will bristle at the term spiritual being used to describe them. Unitarian Universalism is a haven for the atheist, the agnostic, the polytheist, the interfaith family, the multi-religious individual. There isn't any other tradition that I know of that not only allows but encourages a free and responsible search for meaning that actively engages with not just 6 sources, but 6 different categories of sources. The other answer, I think, is that Unitarian Universalism is a haven for marginalized people. With our commitment to universal love, with our commitment, as our first principle states, to the inherent worth and dignity of every person, we're committed to being a haven for people from marginalized communities. And so there's a challenge to our faith when there's a conflict between these two different but often overlapping groups. While there isn't a litmus test for what you believe as a Unitarian Universalist, that's core. We're non-creedal. You don't have to believe a particular thing. We do have consensus on different issues about how our values lead us and how we're led to respond to the world. The search is both free and responsible. So, for example, if you're a free-thinking atheist or agnostic or theist or polytheist for that matter, and your free search leads you to hold views that our consensus has deemed to be racist or homophobic or transphobic, we'll do our best to listen to your perspective and to engage in respectful conversation with you because we believe that no one is outside of the circle of love. We'll practice being loving towards you to the best of our abilities, but we'll also hold to our convictions. We'll be true to our values and where they've led us. I just want to name that those two things, being committed to our values, deeply committed, willing to really show up for our values, while keeping our minds open and being open to having our minds changed, that's not easy. We've given ourselves a difficult task. I don't know about you, but I really want Unitarian Universalism to be able to change my mind. There's a story about the effort to desegregate the first Unitarian Society of Chicago. That's right. In 1948, the first Unitarian Society of Chicago was a whites-only institution. It was even written into the bylaws. So in 1948, the minister, Reverend Leslie Pennington, and prominent UU theologian James Luther Adams and some others decided to propose a change to those bylaws. Now, most people on the board supported this change, but one member strongly opposed it. Your new program is making desegregation into a creed, he said. You are asking everyone in our church to say they believe desegregating, or inviting or even recruiting people of color to attend church here is a good way to tackle racism. What if some members don't believe this? The debate continued for some time at that board meeting until James Luther Adams spoke up and said to the member who strongly opposed desegregation, "What do you say is the purpose of this church?" There was a pause. And then the board member who opposed opening the church to people of color replied. He said, "Okay, Jim, the purpose of this church is to get hold of people like me and change them." I want Unitarian Universalism to change us. So I want to say that to be truly welcoming, we need to do two things. First, we need to unearth those things that we're making priorities, those default settings that go against our deepest values and our true purpose. We need to answer the question, what's getting in the way of our truly being welcoming to people from all backgrounds, heritage, means, and abilities? And then we need to commit to not making those priorities more important, those default settings more important than our true purpose. And second, we need to know what our true purpose is. We need to be open and forthright about that. That's a generous thing that we do for each other and for the people that come to us. To say, that there are some beliefs that run counter to our values and our purpose, that we engage in a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. And we know whether that search for truth and meaning is both free and responsible when it leads us to be a haven for the most marginalized in our society. If it leads us anywhere else, we've become lost on our journey. If it doesn't lead us to being a haven for the most marginalized, we're worshiping a false god. So I'll end with just a few more words from David Foster Wallace's, from his Kenyon College commencement address. He said this: "The really important kind of freedom involves attention and awareness and discipline, and being able to truly care about other people and to sacrifice for them over and over in myriad petty, unsexy ways every day. That is real freedom. That is being educated and understanding how to think." Or in other words, that's how the scarecrow gets a brain. I know I gave the scarecrow a heart last week. Did anybody notice that? But that's how the scarecrow gets a brain. So may it be so. And may we be among those who make it so. Amen, 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 and blessed be.
Though we will extinguish our chalice flame, we carry within us what we kindled: the light of inspiration, the warmth of compassion, the fire of commitment. May we bring these gifts into our lives and share them radiantly out into the world. And now, I invite you to join in our community blessing. This church is dedicated to the proposition that behind all our differences and beneath all our diversity, there is a unity that makes us one and binds us forever together in spite of time, death, and the space between the stars. We pause now in silent witness to that unity.
Sometimes people ask me to give them a resource, especially newcomers, to understand Unitarian Universalism. And I feel like our hymnal is actually perhaps the best resource we could give. And so as we sang today, "Come, come, whoever you are." And as we also sang today, "Though the sheltering walls are thin, may they be strong enough to keep hate out and keep love in." We have to hold both of those realities as Unitarian Universalists. This is the church of the open mind. May we use our open minds in the service of our loving hearts, and may they give us the wisdom to take courageous action for love and justice in the world. May it be so, and may we be among those who make it so.